What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right. So, in this particular video, I want to talk about the now late Jerry West. Jerome Allen West, better known as Jerry West, of course, passed away on June 12th, 2024. He was 86 years old. He played his entire 14-year career with the Los Angeles Lakers. He was drafted in 1960, the second overall pick in that particular draft, selected by the then Minneapolis Lakers, though I believe they were at that time, that might have been the last year they played in Minneapolis. I have to look that up, but soon they became the Lakers. And listed as a point guard, but really he was a combo guard who had characteristics more of a shooting guard, although he could pass at a very high level, obviously. For his career, I think he averaged something like 27.6 rebounds, 5 assists. He was also a very good rebounding guard for his size and position. He was listed as 6'2", but in reality, Jerry West was around 6'3.5". Barefoot, in shoes, probably around 6'4", or about Dwayne Wade's height. All right, 6'4"-ish. I think about 180 pounds. Tremendous offensive player. The best guard in the NBA from at least his second or third season, pretty much throughout the duration of his career, at least until 1972-ish. 14-time NBA All-Star, the only player to win Finals MVP while on the losing team. NBA champion in 1972. Had an atrocious 1-8 Finals record, but to be fair, he almost always had to go against, in the finals, he almost always had to go against Bill Russell's Celtics. If not the Celtics, he went against a Knicks team that had a Hall of Famer in every starting lineup position. So Jerry West, although he had a horrible finals record, every year he went up against a super team. He didn't have the benefit of free agency. You were at the mercy of your team's front office as far as your destination. As far as his resume is concerned, as I said, NBA champion, Finals MVP, 14-time NBA All-Star, NBA All-Star Game MVP, 1972. Matter of fact, I believe he hit the game-winning shot in that All-Star game. 10-time NBA All-First Team, 2 times All-NBA Second Team, 4 times NBA All-Defensive First Team. Now remember, they didn't start that distinction until I think 68. So he was making All-NBA First Teams in his 30s. And well into his 30s. NBA All-Defensive Second Team, 1968-69, the first year that award was given. Scoring champion, 1970. Pretty much nobody had a chance in the 60s of winning the scoring title for much of that decade with the likes of Wilt Chamberlain and then later on Rick Barry in the league. Led the NBA in assists in 1972. One of the few players to lead the league in scoring and assists, showing his versatility. 35th anniversary team, 50th anniversary team, 75th anniversary team. Number 44 retired by the Los Angeles Lakers. For his career, as I said, 27 points. Actually, his career numbers are a little bit better than I said. I said 27, 6, and 5. His career averages were 27 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 6.7 assists. And his playoff numbers were even better. He won Olympic gold in Rome in 1960. And in 1959, won the gold in the Pan American Games. Now, I contend that with the way the game is played today, Jerry West would be even better. He'd be even better. Keep in mind, I want to give you an idea about how efficient this guy was. When he was playing in the 1960s, matter of fact, let me see if I can find these numbers for you. Here we go. Here we go. I want to give you an idea about how efficient Jerry West was. Jerry West, for his career, shot 47.4% from the floor. Okay? 47.4%. That would be great today. Matter of fact, that's pretty close to what Steph Curry shoots for his career. Steph Curry shoots 47.3% for his career. All right, this past season, he shot 45%. Now, he takes a lot of threes. So for him to shoot 45, 46, 47% is remarkable, still great. But I want to give you an idea about how efficient this guy was, Jerry West. Let's go to 1965. Let's go to 1965, so the prime of his career. The league average for field goal percentage in 1965 was 42.5%. 42.5%. That was the league average. That takes into account big men, centers, power forwards. Jerry West in 1965 shot 49.7% from the floor. As a 6'4" guard, listed at 6'2". That's simply amazing. It's amazing. Every year, pretty much, let me see, virtually every year of his career, if not every year, he shot above league average as a guard. And not only that, Jerry West was always amongst the league leaders in field goals attempted per game. So this was a prolific scorer who often had to take difficult shot attempts with defenders on him, and he was still able to shoot at a high percentage. Why? Because he knew his spots, and he always put himself in a position to be efficient. Now, although we saw highlights of him taking a lot of jump shots, most of the time when you see highlights, it's highlights of Jerry West taking jump shots. But keep in mind, he also, especially when he was a little bit younger, I say until maybe age 30, 31, he drove to the basket quite a bit. Maybe not as much as Rick Barry when he was younger, but he drove to the basket a lot. So keep in mind, back then you had Bill Russell, you had Will Chamberlain, you had Nate Thurman, you know, you had Zelmo Beatty, you had all these big men, you had Walt Bellamy. You had big men patrolling the paint back then. Now, in today's NBA, everything's pushed out to the perimeter for the most part. And you have stretch fours sometimes masquerading as centers. And the center position is not what it once was. It's pretty much been phased out from what we grew up watching. So what I mean is that Jerry West would pretty much be more unencumbered. And while he wasn't the fastest player in the NBA, he wasn't no slowpoke. So he would get a lot more easier baskets, is what I'm trying to say. The degree of resistance at the rim would be far less. The game would be less physical, okay? One of the things about Jerry West is that plagued him was injuries. He played 14 seasons, but only played in, I think, 932 games. By comparison, Oscar Robertson played the same exact amount of seasons, but played in something like 140 more games overall in his career. Why? Because Jerry West was just afflicted with injuries. Some of them were freakish, but some of them were due to the physicality of the NBA in the 1960s was even more physical than the 1980s and 90s. Jerry West had to contend with hand checking. When a guy hand checking an offensive player, you put them in a position where they don't want to be. You know what I'm saying? You push them off kilter. And Jerry West was strong, but still, with having to play a guy using your feet can be a little bit more difficult. You know what I'm saying? Which is why sometimes some of these players don't play defense all game. You know what I'm saying? Not making excuses, but it can be more difficult. So that gives the offensive player the advantage. So that's a further advantage Jerry West would have. He would have a lot more open looks in today's NBA. Reason why I believe that is because I think Jerry West, being the shrewd executive that he wound up being, I think the best executive in the history of the NBA, right? Him and Red Auerbach. I think that as we're in the player empowerment era, Jerry West would have had the shrewdest eye for acquiring talent, acquiring guys. In the player empowerment era, 25-year-old Jerry West would have more of an open dialogue with management. He would have more of a say. And we know Jerry West, like I said, he understands the game. He knows what pieces to get to make a team and to make a great team and to make him better. So I think he would somehow make the game a lot easier for him, as well as a winning coalition as far as player, a winning unit. Another thing, a lot of people look at these highlights and see Jerry West dribbling one ball and they erroneously think that's all he could do. But what they don't understand is that until the very early 1970s, the NBA was very conservative. The NBA was very strict on palming and carrying. So, when you saw him do a crossover, it was real quick. He couldn't do all this razzle-dazzle stuff. They didn't really change that, the NBA, until the early 70s for a couple of reasons. Number one of the reasons why they changed it was to compete with the ABA. The ABA started, I think, in 1967. And by the early 70s, it was starting to draw other talent from the NBA, like Zelmo Beatty, like Rick Barry, certain guys who they thought would be stars in the NBA went to the NBA went to the ABA. George Gervin, Julius Erving, Charlie Scott. What's his damn name? Dan Pierre. I can't think of his first name right now, top of my head. All these guys, David Thompson a little bit later on, all these guys went to the ABA because they had more freedom. You have more freedom as far as offensive play. That's why in the ABA, I will contend, and I will agree and yield to the point that the NBA had better big men. The ABA by the mid-70s had superior guard play. So they started loosening up the rules. Also, to contend with the ABA to allow the game to be a little bit more exciting. Also, to give guys like Pete Maravich, who was a wizard with the ball, and to allow, a guy like Earl the Pearl Monroe, to allow Nate Archibald, to allow these guys to display their wizardry with the basketball. So Jerry West, I'm not saying he would be Kyrie Irving, but he would have had a lot more freedom to do certain things. I think if you put a Jerry West today and give him a 23-year-old Jerry West and give him time to prepare, you would see that improvement in his ball handling. You know what I'm saying? It was good for the time he played in, but it'll be even better today. It'll be much better. He was already probably the best overall shooter in the NBA in that era. And I can kind of make an argument that Jerry West played something a little bit, not exactly, but the way that he played was a little like Kobe. He wasn't as athletic as Kobe. I'm not saying that. But the ISO, you know what I'm saying, the 1-2 dribble combos, as far as his when he's in his offensive when he's in his offensive set, it was a little bit like that. He wasn't as athletic as Kobe. Kobe was bigger, Kobe was faster, Kobe was stronger, but he kind of had a offensive game like that. And that's why Kobe took from other guys. He took from Mike. He took from a little bit from Jerry West, obviously. So another thing. So I think he would be a tremendous one-on-one basketball player. And on a defensive end, that's something that doesn't get talked about much. If that stat was tracked, Jerry West would have probably led the league in steals multiple times. So I think he would always be amongst the leaders, if not the leader in steals. You know, I know that side of the ball isn't as appreciated as it used to be, but I think Jerry West would be amongst the leaders in defensive and steals, and he'd be one of the better, if not the best, two-way guard in the NBA. He would have been a great three-point shooter, not on Steph Curry's level, but at least something around the range of a Kyrie Irving, or close to it, 30, I would say 37, 38, 39%. We know he was a great foul shooter, always usually in the 80% range. He'd have been efficient. He had the quickest release in the NBA. His release time was on par with a guy like a Bernard King. I think that he would have added probably a fadeaway jumper in his repertoire. Although with the defense being sort of lax a little bit, do guys really need that as much as they used to? Michael Jordan or Kobe's time? So, you know, I think Jerry West would be even better today. I'm not going to put numbers out there, but I put it like this. I think that he could have been better than Dwayne Wade, and Dwayne Wade was phenomenal. The only thing Wade really has on Jerry West is athleticism. And remember, Wade was never a great three-point shooter. And Wade was still able to have seasons averaging over 30 in his prime. Another thing I think would have made Wade great is that he could adjust to whatever the team needed. There are times when Jerry West could be a facilitator. There could be times when Jerry West could play the point, and he'll have a game where he scores 18 points, might get you 6 or 7 rebounds, and get 12 or 13 assists. Then there are games where, you know, nobody's making any shots. He has to put on his cape, and he'll get you 45, 47, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. It's whatever the team needed. He was a utility man. And I think that at the end of the day, I think he would have been a better player. I'm not going to say accolades and all this type of stuff, but I'll just put it like this. I think if the team needed him to be a facilitator, he would have been amongst the best facilitators in the NBA and have been amongst the leaders in assists. I don't think he would have led the NBA in assists because you have guys like Halliburton a couple years ago, Chris Paul, you had guys like that who their primary role was as a point guard. But I do think West could have averaged 7.5 to 8.5 assists a game in today's NBA. Oh, if that's what his role was, just as a point guard. If they needed him to score, he could have definitely been amongst the leaders in scoring. I mean, this is a guy that averaged 29.2 points per game, I believe, or 29.1, one of the two, in the playoffs, which used to be the all-time record until it was eclipsed by Michael Jordan. I think that's still like number 4 all-time. I think number 1 is Jordan. Number 2 is Luka Doncic. Number 3 is Allen Iverson. Then you got Jerry West. And he didn't have the benefit of a three-point shot. So he's been scoring even more points, which is my point. I put it like this. I could see the case for him averaging for a career close to 30 points a game and close to Michael Jordan or about what Mike averaged in the playoffs. Remember, Jerry West is a guy that averaged 46.5 points per game in the playoff series against the Baltimore Bullets in 1965, which is still the all-time record. Nobody's ever averaged more points per game in a playoff series. Not Michael Jordan, not Kobe Bryant, not Bernard King. Nobody. So, yeah, I think that Jerry West would be an all-time great. Excuse me, he is an all-time great, but he'd been even better. Now, what ranking on as far as a player? Well, if you give him time to prepare and get ready, because you know had to be in better conditioning, obviously, a little bit better conditioning. Although, to be honest with you, those guys played an even faster era in the 60s and early 70s. The pace was even faster. So honestly, I think there's a little bit overstated about their conditioning. I mean, remember, Wilt Chamberlain played in the fastest paced season of all time, 1962, and the man averaged 48 minutes a game. So I have to laugh when I see these fraudulent idiots on TV say Wilt wouldn't be able to play in today's game because of endurance. You don't know what people like that need to get off television. Get off television. Or at the very least, if what Chris Carter's saying is true and all this stuff is scripted, you got to script something better to say than that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I can see why I can see an argument for him being at least a top 5 player in the NBA if he was playing today, at least, and an MVP candidate in his prime. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Tell me what you guys think.